911 emergency.
Yes, I'm in the middle of the field. It's like we're just pushing guys over. Right here going towards Javelin on both sides. My truck ran out of gas. There's one car here. Got shaken to the woods. Please hurry.
Okay, now run that by me.
I'm not talking to him. I actually ran into him.
Ah, you ran into him. Okay.
Got the first guy.
Do you need an ambulance?
Yeah, no, I need the cops.
Okay.
In January 2013, Brandon Mason Lawson, 26-year-old father from Texas, vanished into thin air after a late-night roadside call for help. What began as an ordinary night took a mysterious turn when his car was found abandoned. In a frantic 911 call, the voice of Brandon trembled with fear as he whispered about being chased and urgently needing help. Despite extensive searches and investigations, Brandon remained an insoluble puzzle and left his family and friends desperate for answers. Who was he running from, and what really happened that night? Let's watch the video to explore the mystery. At the time of his disappearance, Brandon Lawson was an oil field worker from San Angelo, Texas. By all accounts, he was a loving father of 4 children and a dedicated partner to his girlfriend, Ledessa Lofton, with whom he had shared a decade-long relationship. As the mother of their 3 children and stepmother to the eldest daughter of Brandon, Ledessa was deeply concerned about the recent drug relapse of Brandon, which had led to his unexplained absence. Though their relationship was marked by typical ups and downs, they shared a bond built on years of shared experience and the trials of raising a family together. However, like many young people, Brandon had his struggles. He had a history of substance abuse, specifically with methamphetamines. However, he had reportedly been clean for about 6 months before the night he vanished. His family and friends knew him as a hardworking and resilient man who was attempting to turn his life around. Still, the grip of addiction had overwhelmed him in the past, and the pressure of balancing family life and his job in the demanding oil industry weighed heavily on him. On the night of August 8, 2013, an argument between Brandon and Ledessa set off the chain of events that would lead to his disappearance. The evening began like any other. Brandon arrived home in San Angelo after a long day of work. Between 10:45 and 11 p.m., a fierce argument broke out between Brandon Lawson and Ledessa Lofton. Initially, it was unclear what exactly triggered the argument, but later revealed by Ledessa that Brandon had not returned home the previous night, which caused her to become frustrated and suspicious. At around 11:30 p.m., after the argument worsened, Brandon decided to leave the house. He called his father that he was coming over to his house, which was in Crowley, Texas, and was approximately a 3-hour drive from San Angelo. At 11:54 p.m., he got into his silver Ford F-150 and drove off, and left Ledessa behind. She wasn't overly concerned at the time and thought he would cool off and return once he had calmed down. Later in an interview in 2018, Ledessa reflected on the fight and reclaimed that the fight was a contribution of several factors. Major contributing factors were the demanding work schedule of Brandon, which was exceeding 60 hours per week, and the recent birth of their youngest son had introduced new stressors between them. Ledessa expressed deep regret over the argument and acknowledged the emotional burden of her words. She confessed that for a long time she blamed herself. She was still haunted by the memory of their last confrontation and said, "I will never get those words back." At approximately 12:30 a.m. on August 9th, Brandon called his brother Kyle to inform him that he had run out of gas along Highway 277, which was near the small town of Bronte. It is a town consisting of a wide, rugged area of hills and desert. The land around it is tough and unforgiving, with steep hills, rocky patches, and dry riverbeds. It is remote and isolated, with only a few people living there. Cell phone service is limited, and there aren't many services nearby. At night it is pitching dark, so dark that only the stars break through the black sky. The silence is heavy and interrupted only by the wind. In a place like this, getting stuck can quickly become a serious problem. This is exactly what happened to Brandon Lawson on the night of August 9, 2013. His truck ran out of gas along Highway 277 just outside of Bronte. Suddenly, he was alone in the middle of nowhere and exposed to the harsh environment. He has nothing to do except wait for his brother. Kyle recalled that during one of their calls, Brandon sounded out of control. He told Kyle that someone is chasing him, which obviously raised alarm bells. When Kyle pressed for more details, Brandon added that it was the Mexicans in the neighborhood who were after him. Again confused, Kyle asked if he was hallucinating due to drug use, but Brandon denied it. Kyle was concerned but unsure of what was going on. He, along with his wife and their 4-year-old child, quickly headed to the house of Ledessa to grab a fuel can so they could help Brandon. As they drove, Kyle kept trying to stay in touch with his brother. However, every time they spoke, Brandon didn't seem willing or able to hold a full conversation. Despite the best efforts of Kyle to communicate and get a clear picture of what Brandon was facing, their conversations were brief and disjointed and added another layer of mystery to an already confused situation. At 12:50 a.m., Brandon made a distressing call to 911, which has since become one of the most crucial and confusing pieces of evidence in the case. The 911 call was placed to a local nursing home in Robert Lee, Texas, due to routing errors. The voice of Brandon on the call was panicked and inconsistent. His words were difficult to understand, but certain phrases stand out. Clearly confused by the call, the dispatcher attempted to ask questions, but responses of Brandon were fragmented and unclear. He seemed to be in a state of panic and mentioned someone chasing him into the woods and requested immediate help. Despite the confusing nature of the call, it was obvious that Brandon was in distress and believed he was being pursued by someone. Here's a breakdown of the phone records leading up to Brandon's disappearance. At 12:51 a.m., Kyle left a voicemail after Brandon claimed he was being chased. Brandon then tried to call Ledessa, but couldn't reach her, as she had left her phone in her car after an argument. The urgency grew when the wife of Kyle also called Brandon, and then Kyle again called him, but none of them received answers. By 12:57 a.m., Brandon contacted his neighbor, but this yielded no clarity. Again, at 1:04 a.m., a dispatcher from a nursing facility reached out to Brandon about his earlier 911 call. Then at 1:09 a.m., Brandon made 3 more calls to Kyle. One of these calls was when he told Kyle that he was running through a field and bleeding. Kyle later mentioned in an interview that he didn't think Brandon was seriously hurt. He assumed his brother had just tripped or had a minor accident. Then at 1:15 a.m., Brandon made his final 2 calls to Kyle. These would be the last outgoing calls from his phone before things went silent. This string of calls paints a chaotic picture of that night. Brandon was clearly distressed and was trying to reach out to multiple people, which included his brother, girlfriend, neighbor, and even 911. But due to poor cell reception, his frantic state, and possibly the dark and dangerous terrain, a meaningful communication was nearly impossible. The confusion between his calls and attempts of his family to locate him only added to the uncertainty surrounding his final moments. At around 1 a.m., a sheriff deputy of Coke County arrived at the location of Brandon's truck after they received a call from a truck driver who had reported the vehicle parked hazardously on the side of the road. By the time the deputy arrived, Kyle had also reached the scene, but there was no sign of Brandon. What made the situation even more bizarre was that during a phone call with Kyle around 1:18 a.m., Brandon claimed he could see both Kyle and the deputy from his hiding spot and said, "I can see you. I'm right here." Despite Brandon's claim, neither Kyle nor the deputy could spot him anywhere near the truck or the surrounding area. With an active warrant out for his arrest in Johnson County on a charge of drug possession with intent to deliver, Kyle assumed that Brandon was trying to hide from the police. He thought that Brandon didn't want to be caught, and especially with the deputy already at the scene. Neither Kyle nor the deputy knew at that moment that Brandon had made a 911 call earlier, so they didn't have all the pieces to understand what was really happening. Kyle later said that he didn't feel like he was in any danger. After talking with the deputy, Kyle decided to drive a little way up the road. He parked further down and hoped that Brandon might come out of hiding once the deputy left. Kyle waited there for 30 to 45 minutes, but when Brandon didn't show up, he assumed everything was fine and left for San Angelo. Later, at around 5 a.m. on August 9th, Kyle returned to the area where his truck had run out of gas. He called out for his brother, but once again Brandon didn't appear. A couple of days later, on August 11th, a deputy reported that a small private search team had been gathered to look for Brandon. They started their search at around 8 a.m., but ended at around noon without finding anything substantial. The only clue they came across was a small area under a tree where it seemed like someone had sat down. This spot was close to the road and within sight of his truck. Despite the efforts of Kyle and the search team, there were no other signs of Brandon or where he might have gone, and left his family with more questions than answers. In the years since the disappearance of Brandon, numerous theories have emerged. Some are grounded in the facts of the case, while others originated from the strange nature of his final phone calls. One of the most widely discussed theories in the disappearance of Brandon Lawson is the idea that he may have fallen victim to foul play. His 911 call on the night of August 9, 2013, where he mentioned being chased into the woods, has driven speculation that Brandon encountered someone or something dangerous that night. Some have even suggested that it could have been related to drug activity. Given that Brandon had used methamphetamines shortly before the incident, people wonder if he might have been involved in a dangerous situation and possibly a drug deal gone wrong, or a confrontation with violent individuals while stranded on the highway. However, the lack of the evidence casts doubt on this theory. No signs of a struggle were found near his truck, and there were no reports of other vehicles in the area at the time. The scene around the truck was strangely undisturbed and left many to wonder that if foul play was involved, where did it happen, and who was involved? Another theory that has gained some traction is that Brandon might have disappeared on purpose. His life was complicated at the time. Perhaps the combination of legal troubles, personal issues, and his rocky relationship with his girlfriend pushed him to take drastic measures. Some believe Brandon may have used the situation as an opportunity to escape his life and start fresh somewhere else. This theory is supported by a few pieces of circumstantial evidence. Brandon was the only person with the key to his pickup truck, which had been left partially over the white line on the road. The truck was towed around 8 a.m. on August 9, 2013, and law enforcement began to investigate shortly after. Deputy Neal, who was assigned to the case, checked several properties in the area for signs of activity. Many of these properties were only used seasonally, and the deputy wanted to see if Brandon might have sought water or shelter there. However, Neal found nothing that indicated Brandon had been there. On August 13th, LaDessa officially filed a missing person report, and Texas Ranger Nick Hanna, who was now leading the case, conducted a helicopter search. They flew over the area near US 277 and the Colorado River, but saw no signs of Brandon. The helicopter search revealed one interesting detail, that there was enough exposed ground that someone would likely have been spotted from the air if they were lying down or hiding. This led deputies to conclude that Brandon Lawson was no longer in Coke County. In his final report, the deputy stated that he didn't believe Brandon was lost or hiding in the area. His conclusion was based on a few factors. Kyle Lawson had told him that Brandon was likely hiding in the brush near his truck to avoid being discovered by the deputy. However, there were no signs of foul play in or around the truck. And most importantly, the text messages between Brandon and LaDessa on the night of his disappearance hinted at a heated argument. Neal believed that after he and Kyle left the scene, Brandon probably walked back to the road and got a ride from a passing motorist. continued absence of Brandon over the years has only strengthened the belief that he intentionally disappeared. At the time of his disappearance, the area was experiencing a severe drought. During aerial searches, they were able to spot small objects from the air, such as corn sacks. If Brandon had been on the ground, they would have easily seen him. Furthermore, the river in the area was extremely low, with the deepest parts only reaching knee-high water. The conditions suggested that if Brandon had been in the area, he would have been spotted during their searches. The deputy also pointed to an active warrant of Brandon for possession with intent to deliver as a possible reason for his disappearance. He speculated that Brandon, wanting to avoid legal trouble, might have decided to run. This theory is further backed by the fact that Brandon had cashed in his $401,000 with Renegade Oil Services just before he went missing, and possibly as part of a plan to disappear. Several months after the disappearance of Brandon, Kyle Lawson was asked to meet with Sheriff McCutcheon Ranger Hanna, who was an investigator from Johnson County, at the same place where a warrant of Brandon had been issued. They questioned Kyle about his involvement and asked if he had harmed his brother or helped him escape. Kyle eventually requested a polygraph test to clear his name. According to Kyle, although there were some inconsistencies due to coughing during the test, he passed the test regarding harming his brother. Another theory surrounding his death is the accidental death, or the lost in the wilderness theory. US 277 is a dry and rugged area which is filled with thorny bushes, cacti, and dangerous animals like rattlesnakes and wild hogs. The extensive searches that have been carried out seem to reflect this belief. Each lead has ended in disappointment, with no trace of him found. The last theory suggests that Brandon may have experienced a drug-induced hallucination or paranoia due to his recent use of methamphetamines. Methamphetamine can cause severe paranoia, confusion, and erratic behavior, particularly if someone has been awake for an extended period. It's possible that references of Brandon to people chasing him were the result of a hallucination brought on by the drugs, and that he fled into the wilderness in a disoriented state. Paranoia refers to an intense fear or distrust of others, and often accompanied by irrational thoughts or beliefs that someone or something is out to harm them. In the context of drug use, paranoia can manifest as a heightened sense of threat or danger, and even in the absence of real external threats. This theory could explain bizarre phone calls of Brandon, but it still doesn't answer the question of what happened to him after he ran from his truck. Did he succumb to the elements? Did he fall into a ravine or get stuck somewhere inaccessible? After Brandon Lawson disappeared, his family has been left in a painful situation, torn between hope and harsh reality. His father, Brad Lawson, battles with conflicting emotions. On one hand, he knows the chances of Brandon being alive are slim, but on the other, he is haunted by nightmares where Brandon is still alive, perhaps forced into slave labor by a cartel. Brad can't shake the idea that his son might still be out there somewhere, and the possibilities for foul play seem endless. Could someone have been following Brandon that night? Did he enter onto private property and meet a deadly encounter? Or was it a crime of opportunity, with someone passing by seeing him vulnerable and taking advantage? For Ladessa Lofton, the uncertainty is unbearable. She fears that her children will grow up, get married, or even have kids of their own without ever knowing what happened to their father. The memory of that night weighs heavily on her, and especially the fight they had before he disappeared. Hurtful words were exchanged, and it is a guilt she struggles with every day. The last link they have to Brandon is the weird 911 call he made that night. For Ladessa and her children, it's a painful reminder of his final moments. His two older daughters listen to the recording on YouTube and trying to make sense of his words, but it only deepens the heartache. Brad is firm in his belief that his son didn't just run away. He argues that the warrant for arrest of Brandon wasn't enough to make him abandon his family, and Brandon had faced legal issues before and was always willing to face the consequences. In fact, he had plans for the future, including starting a new job that offered more money and benefits, which was supposed to begin the Monday after his disappearance. Adding to the confusion is the fact that none of Brandon's belongings, like his wallet, keys, phone, or even his shoes, have ever been found. His brother is lost by how someone could disappear so completely without leaving behind a single clue. This only strengthens the suspicion of the family that foul play was involved. Ledessa believes that someone out there knows what happened to Brandon, and she holds on to hope that this person will eventually come forward. There are unanswered questions that continue to haunt her, like who the trucker was that reported Brandon's pickup or the identity of the dispatcher who spoke to him that night. Ledessa believes that these people might hold critical pieces of the puzzle that could finally explain what happened. Despite telling herself that the disappearance of Brandon might have been an accident, Ledessa can't ignore the alarming tone of his 911 call.
Do you need an ambulance?
No, I need the cops.
Okay. Is anybody hurt? Hello? Hello?
She doesn't want to believe that anyone would harm the man she loved so deeply. Friends and family of Brandon Lawson established a Facebook page titled Help Find Brandon Lawson, which has gathered significant attention and support since its beginning. As of 2024, the page brags over 29,000 followers and demonstrates widespread interest and concern for the unresolved disappearance of Brandon. This online platform serves as a critical hub for sharing updates, information, and appeals related to the case of Brandon. It provides a space where loved ones of Brandon can connect with supporters, share memories of Brandon, and assemble efforts to keep his story in the public eye. The page plays a pivotal role in the ongoing search for answers and encourages individuals with any information about the whereabouts of Brandon or the circumstances of his disappearance to come forward. Private investigator Paula Boudreau, hired by Ledessa, has also been working tirelessly to track down clues and often drawn leads from the large community following the Help Find Brandon Lawson Facebook page. In her searches, Boudreau used cadaver dogs and helicopters to scan the land, but she has also faced obstacles. Some landowners have refused to allow searches on their property. Before 2022, the search for Brandon Lawson hadn't produced any leads or significant progress. But in early 2022, a small search party made a breakthrough at the last known location of Brandon. They discovered a pile of his clothes, which led them to alert authorities. Soon after, human remains were found in the area. By October 2023, the Help Find Brandon Lawson Facebook page shared that preliminary DNA results and the clothing found indicated the remains were likely of Brandon's. Additional tests were underway to compare the genetic markers from the remains with DNA from father of Brandon. The Texas Ranger overseeing the case expressed cautious optimism about confirming the identity of the remains. As of October 2024, there have been no further updates on the identification. It's 11 years now since Brandon went missing, and his family is still searching for answers. Unfortunately, these remains have not yet been truly identified. Due to the advanced state of decomposition, there's little left to work with. Each time a sample is extracted and tested, a portion of the remains is destroyed. This makes it crucial to preserve as much as possible for future DNA testing. The remains have been sent to 2 laboratories in hopes of extracting enough DNA, but those attempts have so far been unsuccessful. In June 2023, the Texas Rangers were exploring other options for identifying the remains, though the family is unable to comment further on what those options are or the current state of the investigation. The disappearance of Brandon Lawson remains a tragic and mysterious case, and now likely to be resolved with the discovery of his remains. Despite this closure, many questions about the events of that night remain unanswered. His family, while grateful for some resolution, may never have all the answers they seek. The story of Brandon underscores the uncertainty of life and the pain of not knowing the fate of a loved one. It emphasizes the need for ongoing improvements in search and rescue efforts, especially in remote areas like West Texas. While the full truth may remain vague, memories of Brandon Lawson will endure in the hearts of his loved ones and all who have followed his heartbreaking story.